When Hurricane Beryl approached the Texas coast, families in the storm's path were rightly worried about gale force winds and flooding. Power outages are always expected in hurricane season, but nobody anticipated over 1 million households and businesses losing power, and nobody expected 500,000 people to be left high and dry a week or more later. The problem this time, perhaps surprisingly, isn't with the grid. There was and remains plenty of power available. The culprit of ongoing power outages is a misallocation of resources across the entire Texas market toward unreliable wind and solar generation and the infrastructure to support that generation, and away from reliability and resiliency. Billions of dollars that should have been spent on critical maintenance of power lines and poles was instead spent on virtue signaling political agendas to build power lines to serve wind and solar generators. In Texas, as a result of a poor market design, over $100 billion in private capital has been invested on unreliable wind and solar, not to mention billions more in subsidies funded by our tax dollars. Although wind and solar make up an impressive percentage of the Texas grid's generating capacity, their actual output is wildly erratic. On a typical summer day when demand is likely to be high, wind can produce anywhere from single digits to over 60% of its generating capacity. And it's nearly impossible to predict with any certainty. If you think summer is bad for alternative energy, winter is worse and much more dangerous, as we learned during Winter Storm Uri. While investors and politicians seeking to curry favor with the green lobby have been pouring cash into unreliable renewables, that money could have been spent on much more beneficial projects, like upgrading power lines to more modern designs and investing in new technologies that allow power to be routed without physical crews on site, which was a recommendation by a City of Houston task force after Hurricane Ike. Just imagine how much more efficient and resilient our electric utilities could be if only a fraction of that $100 billion had instead been spent on more reliable and weather-hardened utilities. Texas should not go the way of California, where negligence of routine power line maintenance and forest management have led to disastrous wildfires. Governor Abbott was right to call for an investigation into the reason behind repeated extended power outages in Houston. There is another factor feeding the degradation of our electric grid. The alphabet soup of ESG and DEI have taken hold of the electric utility industry. Woke investment firms and elitist activist groups have all but forced companies to publicly espouse the radical climate agenda, whether it suits their shareholders and customers or not. Few have been bold enough to resist, Tractor Supply stands alone, lest the climate cartel launch their mudslinging protest and choke off their access to capital, loans, insurance, and more. A free market is no longer free when the major financial players are colluding, not even behind the scenes, but out in the open, to gut politically targeted businesses while forcing dollars into their own green investments. That's exactly what's happening on Wall Street. The worst part of all this, even the most powerful financial club could never actually succeed at eliminating fossil fuels or stopping climate change, only at driving up prices and sending production overseas. It's a power grab with no net gain. Unfortunately, all of the publicly traded utilities, yes, all of the publicly traded utilities in Texas have bent the knee to the climate cartel by embracing the environmental, social, and governance ESG political agenda, and most oppose a reliability standard for heavily subsidized alternative energy sources, namely wind and solar. CenterPoint Energy, which is at the center of the crisis in Houston, is one of those utilities that are content to allow or even promote policies and regulations that have resulted in the aforementioned misallocations of capital. The result is weakened infrastructure, such that even a relatively mild storm, Beryl struck Texas at just a Category 1, can render millions without power for days. If Texas doesn't stand up to the radical climate agenda, the future of Texas may not be so bright. Pun intended. I'm Jason Isaac for the American Energy Institute. Learn more at AmericanEnergyInstitute.com. Follow me on X at Isaac for Energy. Thanks for watching.